Hey guys, welcome to Autismo Studio Umbiamas, conectando Aruba com o mundo via vídeo podcasting. Conectar conosco, compartilhar ideias e histórias para nos inspirar e para conan abrir. Autismo Studio é plataforma de podcast na Aruba. Follow-nos no Facebook, subscribe no YouTube ou na plataforma de podcast preferida. Escute o podcast preferido que hora e onde que está. Autismo Studio, powered by Credits, botou ideia? Credits educava e prepara a abo para vir um empresário exitoso. De business plan, guia personal e préstamo para negócio até com 100 mil florim. Vira para mês donho com Credits. Subway, passa na Subway para o sop, salada, wrap ou flatbread e mais fresco. Com 7 localidades rond Aruba, nós está cerca de Ibo. Subway. Swing Masters, organizando events, conferences of weddings, mister de luz, sound, staging, DJ, trussing of flat screen, Swing Masters está claro para ser boa fiesta éxito. Swing Masters. E agora, Autismo Studio é plataforma de podcast de Aruba, está apresentar.
Good afternoon, everybody. Feliz a tarde. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Stima, Autista, the podcast with its mission to create awareness on the topic of autism for the general public and around Aruba and the world. My name is Byron Lesire. I am the host of this podcast, and I am not alone here in this studio. I have my colleague Kay, who is the co-host of the podcast as well. Kay, would you like to introduce to the people out there who you are?
Yes. Hi, my name is Kay. I'm the co-host of the Stima Autista, the podcast. And also, we're not alone today, Byron. We have two special guests.
Exactly, Kay. We're not alone. We have two special guests to kick off this inaugural episode. We have my uncle Raymond Lesire. And you know her from one of the episodes from the podcast from Autismo Studio, Sincerely Carolina. She is also the president of Fundacion Autismo Aruba. She's Carolina Thiel-Span. First, I'm going to introduce to my uncle Raymond, and then to Carolina. First, Raymond.
Well, hi. I want to say welcome to everybody who's going to see this, who's going to hear this. It's a privilege to be here. And I'm excitedly waiting to participate and to answer and to discuss the topics you guys are going to bring forward today.
Very glad to hear that, Raymond. Yes. And now I'm going to pass the mic over to Carolina Thiel-Span. So, Carolina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Hi, Byron. How are
Hello.
you? I feel kind of weird being here as a guest, right? Like you just said, I have my own podcast show, so it's really nice to be here as a guest. It's kind of different. I'm a little nervous. First of all, yes, my name is Carolina Thiel-Span. I'm the president of Fundacion Autismo Aruba. That's why I'm here today. I am so proud of you too for taking on this challenge. This is a transition, right? We started with a newsletter, but we noticed that people don't necessarily like to read as much as they like to listen. So I am very happy that you both took on this challenge, and now you have your own podcast, and we're gonna educate people. Yes.
Exactly. That's what we're going to do, of course, for the time being.
Yes.
Now, as you know, the mission of Stima Autista, and we're going to have a topic of that today. The introduction is inclusion and autism. What do they mean? And not only that, we have a news bulletin, of course.
Yes.
And that we're going to read you right now. I've handpicked the latest news from the past week and compromised it into 6 top stories, 2 from local, 2 from the world news, and 2 from the sports.
Ooh.
So let's get to it. So, first of all, the CDC's level 4 advisory for the coronavirus pandemic has hammered the hotel industry here in Aruba with a 12-point drop last month. And that does not signal good news for the recovery for tourism. It is not good for the Aruba Hotel and Tourism Association's point of view and for the Aruba Tourism Authority's point of view. The monopoly between Seitar and Vey could go out so soon by a verdict. Last week was supposed to be the start of the new era with the verdict for the end of the monopoly, internet monopoly, between Seitar, and to give it to Digicel to compete with the Seitar for the internet industry.
Interesting.
Unfortunately, there was no verdict, and by that, we have to wait either roughly a whole month to get to it. The world news. David Arness, the British MP, was stabbed to death in a church in London.
Oh my
He was
gosh.
stabbed to death while meeting with his voters in London in the Christ Methodist Church. The attacker stabbed him to death so many times. And right now, the flags in Downing Street and in the parliaments of the United Kingdom were lowered into half-staff in his memory. The U.S. will lift the restrictions for foreign travelers, vaccinated foreign travelers, starting November 8th. The U.S. has confirmed that due to the lowering levels of the coronavirus in the United States, it is possible for foreign travelers to come to the United States. This will end historic restrictions that had affected the entire United States, the entire world, from entering the United States. In sports, as you know, there has been a proposal for a biennial World Cup that happens every 2 years. But two federations, the CONMEBOL and the UEFA, have decided that it could block the vote. And it could happen at any moment. Regardless of the vote, while Gianni Infantino, the president of the FIFA, was touring around the world with the proposal in his mind, with support from the CONCACAF, the African CAF, and the Asian Soccer Federation, they could give them a backing. But there's trouble. The UEFA and the CONMEBOL could boycott the World Cup in the forthcoming years ahead. And there's news locally here in Aruba for the sports. We have a new president for the Aruba Olympic Committee, Wanda Bruxema, and a General Assembly last Thursday at the Holiday Inn. There was reported that there was a vote to elect the new director for the new Olympic cycle in 2021 to 2025. Wanda Bruxema has been elected as the first female president of the Aruba Olympic Committee.
Nice.
Nicole Huberts remained as the Secretary General. There's also a new treasurer, new directives, team members, and also second Secretary General of the Olympic Committee of Aruba. In December, there will be a vote, of course, for the new members of the Aruba Olympic Committee's Athletes Commission.
Nice.
That was the latest news for now. Of course, next episode will have more news to let you people informed. Now we can go to the awareness topic.
Yes.
The first topic we're going to discuss is Fundacion Autismo Aruba Inclusion and what do they do. So, at the very front point, since its founding, Fundacion Autismo Aruba is known to create awareness on autism. And the word inclusion was in the state of mind for all of us, especially to those people with autism and other special needs. However, there's some roadblocks in the road, and the bumps in the road, of course, all because of the discriminatory acts against an autistic people, autistic kid, autistic adult, autistic teen, or even a special needs per person in general. So, we have questions to set up for Raymond and for Carolina, and I'm going to ask the questions for Carolina, and Kay will answer the questions for Mr. Uncle Raymond. So
Awesome.
let's get to it.
Yes.
First question for Carolina for Fundacion Autismo. We're going to do this one by one, as you know. So first of all, to the people who didn't notice, what is autism?
What is autism, right? So autism is a developmental disorder or a behavioral disorder, really. It's a huge spectrum, so we know it as the autism spectrum disorder because I mean, you can have an autistic person who does not have any developmental delays in regarding to like intelligence, but they may have some developmental delays when it comes to like communication signs, right? Communication skills is what I meant to say. So yes, it's a huge spectrum, but basically like the main core characteristics of autism is that children and persons with ASD or autistic persons have issues, or I don't want to call it issues, but have differences because who decided that they were issues? But there are differences in communication skills, and that can be anything from what we know, right? Being overly honest, which could be considered rude sometimes for some people, or too bold, too blunt. But we also see that how they react to inputs being sensory inputs, communication inputs might be a little bit different. So, in a nutshell, that's basically it. And yes, like you mentioned, Fundacion Autismo Aruba is here to educate and, create awareness for this group. And we have been striving for a more inclusive community, Aruba, right? Where, like you mentioned, autistic young adults, but also teens and children and everyone really feels like they can be members of our community and just be able to do whatever they want to do within whatever boundaries they decide for themselves and not boundaries that the community sets for them. Byron, I have a question for you before we continue, right?
Okay.
So the podcast is called Stima, Autista podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means in English? Because maybe we have listeners who don't speak Papiamento. So can you tell them what Stima, Autista means?
Stima Autista, that's a fantastic question. Well, Stima Autista is, I gotta say, this is when you love somebody who is different.
Yes.
And who, no matter what the kind of stereotypes that they have. And for this, we have to be more equal than ever to love somebody, even if it's autistic or not.
Correct.
And for me, Stima Autista, or love an autist, is all kinds of sorts to love somebody. No matter what kind of race, gender, or anything alike. Of course, like you said, Fundacion Autismo, its main goals, we have to bring the goals for the education sector, we have the social sector, we have the labor market section, and also the fourth one. The fourth one, if I'm not mistaken, that is, I don't necessarily know about this.
Families,
Families,
right?
of course. Families. We have to all be united in families, of course.
Yes, we do.
In this time, for the coronavirus pandemic, it's not easy to be with someone you know, someone you love, etc. Especially when you lose somebody. To coronavirus or any kind of a disease, etc., you have to remember them in memory, because you don't know what's going to happen next to you when you lose somebody at this key point with the time. We cannot lose any memory that has been lost.
Exactly. So we want to make sure that families in our community are making the best out of it. And that means that we have to be more inclusive. That means that we have to be more aware, right, of the people around us, what their needs may be, so that we can love them fully for who they are. And that's hard sometimes for some people, but that's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're open to talk about. And, having both you and Kay as amazing young adults, ambassadors, right? Doing the things that you love and also going through hard times but good times. I think it's very important for others to see that. But yes, Byron, we can continue with the question. Sorry for this sidetrack.
It's okay. We know what it is, Fundacion Autismo.
Yes.
But to those of you who know, who don't know the symptoms of autism, can you tell us some of the symptoms that a child would experience if they have autism or not?
Yes, of course. So there are different ones, like I already mentioned, is how we react to inputs, right? Sometimes when we go somewhere and there's a very loud noise, and this is something that you can start seeing from baby, we, sometimes feel uncomfortable, we cover our ears, but we may notice that persons who are autistic, or babies, especially when they're autistic, that even like simple noises that may not seem something, too extreme or too loud or too bothersome will bother them to like an extreme extent. So in babies, you will see that they will cry frantically, especially because they can't communicate with words to us what they are feeling. But with older children or adults even, you will see that they will cover their ears, and you will also see that some autistic children or young adults prefer to wear headsets to make sure that noises that are around them are muffled at all times, to make sure that they don't have a sensory overload. So that is something, but we will also be able to see, right, those reactions to light, to texture. What does that mean, right? So somebody covering their eyes, getting overloaded by lights, somebody who doesn't like the fabric of their clothes. So something that we see in children a lot is when they start using uniforms. At home, parents will kind of figure out what their children like or don't like to wear, especially when they start to communicate. They'll say like, I want to wear this and I don't want to wear that. But here in Aruba, we are used that our public schools have uniforms, and that means not having a decision on the fabric that you choose to wear. And then you'll start seeing children who really feel uncomfortable wearing these uniforms, right? You will see some children chewing out their uniform as a form of trying to escape from that. Let me see, what else do we see? Like I already mentioned, communication skills, right? These are learned behaviors. Everybody learns communication. We know this. But the learning process for autistic people, while they are learning communication cues, is slightly different. So this will cause that, eye contact might be an issue, but this might also mean that things that we learn, such as, not mentioning somebody's weight or not mentioning somebody's look, might seem like a learned behavior, like learned rules, might not necessarily work for autistic people. So they have the tendency to be more open, more blunt. These are little things. We have a bunch of information on our Facebook, and on our Instagram page. There are specific signs for children of different age groups. So you'll see children skipping milestones, right? They won't crawl on the floor and all of a sudden they're running. So these are all things that signal that somebody might be on the spectrum. But it's a very complicated spectrum, right? We also have nonverbal autistic people. That means that they don't speak with words, but doesn't mean that they can't communicate. It just means that they are unable to utter words like we do, communicate the way we do. So those are little things that may help you. And also an important thing to say is autism is not something that you can see. Oftentimes when we think about disabilities, we think about physical disabilities that are visible. So we think about somebody in a wheelchair, we think about somebody who may be blind, right, and uses special glasses or the stick to walk, people who are hard of hearing or deaf, right? They may use a hearing aid. Autism is not something that you can pinpoint by looking at someone. I think that's something very important to mention, because you still hear that somebody says oh, but they look normal. By the way, we hate the word normal.
Of course not.
But yes, with autism, you can't pinpoint and look at someone and be like, oh yeah, that person is autistic or not. So I think that's also very important to let other people know that you will only know this if it is shared, right, by a family member, by themselves, or if they make it known some way, somehow. But it is not something that we can just look at and pinpoint. And it usually is a process, right, to figuring out that the different behaviors that a child is showing is because of the autism. So, yeah. It's a very broad spectrum, but a very awesome one.
It's true. I think I have an example of that.
Tell me.
Well, I didn't speak until I was either 4 or 8, and the first language that I spoke was English. And my mom was shocked when I spoke English. So my mom had to adapt to the local language in Aruba, which is Papiamento, and I'm speaking successfully in English and Papiamento. Currently, I'm training to speak in Spanish and in Dutch.
Awesome.
So it's a process. It's a process.
Yes, it is.
And the behavioral part, I was, well, a bit unsportsmanlike with all sports. Here's an example. When a team is going to lose or losing the game, I wasn't controlling myself with the acceptance of the results of the sports games. For example, in Major League. Right now, here's an example again. Xander Bogaerts and the Red Sox, they lost to the Astros 5-4 last night or last Friday at the ALCS. And right now, if they have a lot of things to do to get them back up in order to win the pennant and go to the World Series and possibly win the game. But I have to say myself, be confident, be assertive to say this, because we all have to accept the results of the game.
Of course, but that might be something a little bit harder, right, for you and for other people, and not necessarily just people on the spectrum, but some people have harder times accepting certain things, noticing, right, the difference, and just being okay with little things. So thank you so much for sharing, Byron. Do you want to ask Kay if she has something to share, Kay? I mean, what was it like for you, right? Signs of autism. I mean, Byron was diagnosed at a very young age, but you weren't. You were until much later in your life. So what was it like for you, who maybe didn't have like those typical, or maybe you did, but wasn't noticed as much, right? Those signs.
Well, I was diagnosed at 15. It happened through school. Well, I was always like the weird kid, you could say. I was quiet. I would hide under tables, cover my ears. I also used headsets at school because the bell rang too loudly. Lights were like bothering me. But after that, I got my diagnosis really fast, I would say. And since then, I've been working and getting therapy on how to be better and cope with all my symptoms, you could say.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I also like wanted to interrupt because you said earlier the word normal that we don't like.
No, we
Of
don't.
course not.
I wanted to say, how can we react instead of saying, well, you don't look autistic? How can we react to it in another way?
Good question, right? This is funny because obviously you both know me when I am very passive, but also when I'm a little bit more assertive, to use Byron's word. So that is, of course, a hard question, right? Especially if it's aimed at you. My assertive yet passive side is telling me to tell you to educate the person, right?
Yes.
And this might be hard because especially if it's somebody that you've known maybe for a while or you have tried to educate before, but I think that no matter what, that might be like the best way to go about it. And what I have learned as well is that sometimes people don't want to be educated, and that's okay too, in the sense that we have to let it go. So if you tell somebody something, correct them in the way that they express themselves towards you, and they are not willing to like take it, then I would suggest, just let it go and tell them that you find it a little bit offensive or disrespectful, but that you will not want to continue this conversation if they're not willing to learn. So, try to make that moment a learning moment. But I think also we have to work really hard on understanding that people's vocabularies are based on right? The community that they're raised in. So if you use the word normal a lot, then that's the word that we go to. But recently I was telling somebody that if you think about it grammatically, how can we refer to a person as normal, right? Normal is a word that we got from statistics, it's the norm of something. But no human follows like the basic norm, right? We fall into that bell curve. So maybe, switch it a little bit to regular, right? Or regular standards that have been applied. And if you really want to go out there and be aware and educated and use educated words, then you can use something like neurodiverse versus being neurotypical. So that's just a little answer.
That's also that you want for yourself to change your vocabulary, right?
Yes. And I'm assuming you mean for yourself as well. Yes, of course, because, I talk to you both a lot, and sometimes I hear you both saying words that I'm like, we need to work on that. But it's conditioning. Everything that we know about our communication, everything that we know is learned. So sometimes it's unlearning and learning new things, and you really want it. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So yes. So a practice that we should do for this podcast and future episodes for you both is avoid the word normal.
Of course, we're not going to say that word anymore. It is the major avoidance word to say it.
Awesome. It's like the one who shall not be named, right?
Of course not. Of course not. We're not going to say that word. I'm not going to say that word. Of course.
Awesome.
All right.
Yes.
Now I'm going to
Next
pass it to Raymond, and Kay has the questions for Raymond to answer. So Kay, take it away.
Exciting.
So Raymond, you've not been talking this whole time. How was the news of having an autistic family member received for you?
Well, it was actually not just me, it was my whole family. At the beginning, to be honest with you, because it's been so many years, it was practically unknown to us. And we all had to be, we can say re-educated. We had to be educated about it. And it took a while. It took almost 10 years for us to get educated about it, because I have my brother has a daughter that is a doctor, and she took the liberty to do a study about it, and then she called everybody in one time at her house, and she did a presentation on a wall like a movie, and it was very informative, and that kind of like put everything into its place, and we could work from there. We didn't have anything. We didn't have no information. I've been a teacher for 14 years.
Wow.
And in my when we were at school, in teacher school, they give you a lot of sociology and psychology and stuff, but they don't really specify autism. We don't get how to deal with it, how to identify it, and we can't do it because we're teachers. So we can report different behavior, but we cannot make any judgments. Okay, so it wasn't easy. I think that would be the easiest answer. It wasn't easy as a person. It wasn't easy as a family. It had to be a collective effort for everybody to come together and just get all the information together, share it, and move from them.
And we think that it is an interesting question for all of us to answer about that. And yes, my journey wasn't easy. Of course, as you guys said, I was diagnosed with autism at 2.5 years old. And as you know, my mother was in tears after she received the diagnosis of the autism. And that is that's so sad, but she was prepared. She was prepared for any kind of scenario like that. And that was completely brave of that part.
If I can add, I'm not a parent yet, and I say yet because I would like to be one day.
Soon.
Okay. I feel like you're more excited than I will ever be.
Oh,
No,
seriously.
but I think what Byron mentioned, and I have gotten to know Raquel, right, your mom,
That's right.
and other parents as well. And I think that there is a difference when you have parents that kind of go into parenting, right, with this idea that their child is gonna fit like the neurotypical mold, that their child is not gonna have any issues in school, in life, socially, whatever. I think for them it hits harder because you were not mentally prepared to deal with whatever. But when I look at somebody like Raquel, right, like you said, she was ready for whatever came. So it wasn't so much, of course, at that time we didn't have a foundation. At that time, parents didn't really have someone or somewhere to go, and the internet wasn't as big as it is today. There wasn't that much information, but going into parenting knowing that you have to have your child's back no matter what, I think is the most important thing, because whatever comes after that, of course it's going to be hard for the family, but it changes. Like your attitude towards parenting has to be that you are open for every single situation, that you have to be willing to accept and grow with it, and just learn as they learn. And I think if there's any advice that I would give to parents out there who might be nervous, who have a newborn, a small baby, that they are seeing things that say like, okay, my baby might be behaving differently, you may be right, and maybe that means that they're autistic, maybe it means something else, but just be prepared to do whatever it takes to move forward, and then I think you'll be fine. And that is something that I try to tell parents. There's no one mold, right, fits all. Like Raquel does not have the answers for our other parents of autistic children, but the willingness, I think that's very important. So I'm happy that you brought that up, how you said it, Byron, and I think that really reflects in your growth and your development as well.
Reflection is key.
Yes.
All right, Kay, next question for Raymond.
Do you feel like your Aruban community treated your family member right?
To put that in perspective, back then, 20 years ago, because there was no info about it, or there were, you guys didn't exist back then, most people would put it aside. So whenever you have a parent with a child that has, you just call them issues, but let's call them behavioral issues, something like that, they would just shut up about it, push it on one side, you're the parent, deal with it, okay? So, and that went on for many, many years. And my sister, Raquel, she I have to say, you just said she's different. She was very strong about it. And she had to learn the hard way and at a really fast pace how to deal with Byron, okay? And I know she didn't have it easy either. But I have to say that most people in that area, and up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that was the behavioral pattern of the community. You have a situation, you deal with it.
It's your situation,
It's
not
your
ours.
situation. Don't bring your stuff in here.
Okay.
If you're not the word that you guys don't want to say, then just keep it over there. Okay, so that's how they dealt with it. And so I'm a very, very, I've been seeing this more and more, that the autistic awareness is growing. And it's gone to a level that at the moment in my school where I teach, I have a couple of students that do have it, and they're in class. And even though we're not specifically trained to deal with students like that, with what I know from my sister, I try to make it work, and it usually does. It usually does. Yes. Okay, so, and that's what I love, because people have to be open to learn.
Yes.
What happened was, in those days, I think that because of the socioeconomic pressure or anything, people were just not that open to learn about this. And listen, it's your thing, just keep it over there. But now, because this is happening more and more, it's not just a Aruba thing, it's a world thing. People are just opening up poco poco, so slowly, and becoming more aware how to deal with this, how to handle with it, and how can we live with it. Okay, so it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy.
Of course not. It's not easy, as it seems, for all of us here in the island and for the global community as well. And now I have a question for you, Carolina.
Ooh.
And this is a key question. The key question is, how can Aruba be more inclusive?
Yeah, so we were right on that, right? So I want to switch it up a little bit.
Okay.
Byron, can you tell me an experience that you have had? And I'll ask you as well, Kay. An experience that you have had where you felt like the community was not being inclusive. And do you know what an inclusive way of experiencing that experience would have been?
All right.
Tell me.
So, when my mom was finding a good daycare, she was noticed that some of the teachers that she was trying to find didn't work with the people with special needs, just like me. And then when she found the school, which is a special education school, Emma School, shout out to them, of course. And I was completely amazed, but at the same time, I was worried. At first, there was bullying, there was teasing, there was all kinds of sorts. And then...
Because you were different, right?
That's right, I was different. And it happened like a cycle. Then I went to SBO after I graduated from Emma to SBO, and the same things happened, but there's a different scenario. The then adjunct director of SBO in Santa Cruz tried to kick me out with some support from the teachers who tried to support him for her to kick me out. But I'm glad that there are teachers who side with me and it requested a meeting with the then director to not let me out from that school. And then when I was at ABB, there was some teasing again, but I'm glad there are unit managers, there are unit coordinators, a director, and all teachers that I experienced in every class. They work with me, and they know the situation of autism and all kinds of things. So I'm very glad that there is some inclusion in education. Currently, I'm in Avond Mavel, as you know.
Yes, you are.
I'm currently in the second year grade,
Ooh.
but there is a catch. The catch is if I got higher grades, I would jump from the second year to the third year and reduce the amount to get to the diploma from 3 to 2. And that could be major for me.
Of
And
course.
for most of the students who were trying to get the diploma faster.
Yeah.
And one experience is from the travel perspective. I love to travel, of course. And we were heading to Florida. And when we get there was one lady who requested me to go to the process for immigration, security faster. And we went to that special second lane for handicaps, disabilities, people, and tourists, for special people like that. And as I could say, it was a smooth process.
Yes.
Because there was a long line at that time at the airport. A long line with full of tourists and locals who were going to the destination in the U.S., like that. And I was so glad that
Of
there
course.
is some inclusion at the time for education and for the travel perspective.
So as you mentioned, Byron, it is recognizing, right? I mean, going back to the last example you mentioned, so the airport. So how do we get to a more inclusive Aruba? It's recognizing that special needs exist. It's recognizing that one size does not fit all. It's recognizing that we can't expect everybody to behave the same in certain situations. Going back to the education sector, you know this. Every time that I do a workshop with teachers, the first thing I ask is your school accessible to everyone? You know, and some people will say like, yeah. And then other people will say like, what do you mean by accessible? And I tell them, well, most of y'all schools are not accessible because you have stairs, right? That means that people on wheelchairs cannot get to every classroom. So these are little things that you know, how do we get to a more inclusive Aruba? That would mean sitting still and realizing and accepting that there are different needs, and then, you know, respecting that as well, that as human beings everybody has the right to accessibility. So I think we need to work a lot of that, and we have talked about the circle, right? We start with awareness, and after awareness people go into the acceptance phase, which is a great phase, but a lot of people kind of stay there like, okay, it's acceptance, I accept this, but it's not my responsibility. That's the hardest switch to make, right? Where we move from accepting to respecting. Respecting means that I need to be able to do whatever is in my hands to provide equal rights to somebody else. So yes, so like in schools, you know, even though you went to special education for a while in your life, special education encompasses a large group of different people with different needs. So it's not just a school for autistic people, but it's a school for other people with other needs. And it's important that we know what those needs are and how we can address them, how we can provide the better services, right, as teachers, as a school, as possible. And that's what we need to work on. And, you know, it goes back to being open. You have to want it. You have to understand and know that it's a right. You have to be able to understand and know that this is necessary for our community, you know, as a whole, to move forward, not just a group of people, but everyone. And I always tell people, you know, people ask me, but Karina, why do you care so much? And I tell them, how would I not care? If my community is not reaching max potential, and when I say my community, I mean everyone in my community, then I will never reach my max potential either. So it's a very, you know, selfish point of view to think that we will arrange things that will let us, only us, right? Whatever us means, move forward. We have to think as a whole. And I think that's very important. It's recognizing that. But Kay, tell me an experience you had where you felt that experience could have been a little bit different and that could have, you know, been a little bit more inclusive. I want to hear that and see if we can reflect on that.
Well, I had a lot of experiences
I am
like
sure.
that. But let me think of one that's more, I guess school, you
Okay.
could say, was not very inclusive.
Mhm.
But I was really lucky to get, even though I got my diagnosis late,
Mhm.
I think I was really lucky to get it at that age because I had a lot of support from my teachers at school.
Mhm.
But going back a little bit, when I was getting older,
Mhm.
there wasn't really a school that I could have all my needs met.
Okay.
But for example, in class, when the children would drag their chairs,
Mhm.
I would talk to my teacher to say that it bothered me, and then all the kids would like lift their chairs and put it under their table,
Mhm.
which was really nice. Cinemas, I could, like social situations that are really loud and the light. I
Mhm.
could say supermarkets sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm getting better at that, so
Yes, we do a lot of grocery runs.
yes, I'm getting way better.
Yes.
What other examples can I use? I think
That's
okay.
good. Yeah. But you know, the little things that you mentioned, so it's everyday situations, right? School, what we already talked with Byron, but we also have other everyday scenarios. Grocery stores. You have some grocery stores that are very aware because they, you know, seek to be aware. They look for information. They train their staff, and then you have others that are not as open. But these are little things. If you think about it, if we create a grocery store that is not accessible, that is not aware of other needs, how are people with these special needs going to meet the basic need of getting food, right? And I think we still have a lot of work to do as a foundation, but as a community as well, that we have to realize that things that we do every day and we sometimes even take for granted are not as accessible and as available to other people. And it's just speaking up. You don't have to be a person with special needs or a family member to see something and be like, I feel like this is not okay. So, creating a more inclusive Aruba, we have a lot of work to do, of course, as a foundation, as ambassadors. You both are ambassadors. But also, everybody in our community has a task. Be vocal about it, right? If you see something that is unfair, if you see something that, doesn't seem right, doesn't feel right, if you see some form of discrimination, bullying, speak up. Say something about it. Make it known that you're not okay with it, because we cannot fight this fight alone. We need everybody on board. So I hope I answered your question, Byron.
I also want to add to that.
Yeah.
We always, like the people that are neurodiverse, always have to adapt in the world, and the world
Exactly.
doesn't have something for us to adapt to it. So, and also, when we get older, we're also gonna be disabled. Maybe we can get an accident, be disabled tomorrow. We
Yeah.
never know. So I just wanted to add that.
Exactly, because we don't know what the future holds, right? This is something you have for life, but neurotypical people who may not really have special needs may become a special needs person tomorrow. They may become deaf, like you said. They may have an accident, they may lose a limb, and all these things. And to think that these are not things that affect us is, kind of crazy. I think we have been doing good as a community moving forward. I love that we have been hearing the word inclusion more and more, but there is still work to be done, and that starts with each and every one of us speaking up.
That's correct. That is completely correct. And now we don't have enough time left, since we know
We have like 20 minutes, Byron, so you can
Sure
ask your questions. Kay, ask your questions, and we'll go as it goes.
Okay, Kay, can you jump to the next question for Raymond?
My next question is, what challenges did you see your family member have?
The main challenge was, like I said before, was coping with the whole situation. As a single person, it is difficult to do it. I mean, alone, you gotta have some background, you gotta have some knowledge.
Support also.
And so, if I want to give support, I gotta know what can I say, what can I do, what can't I do, or what can't I say. So it wasn't easy. That was the biggest challenge, and not just for me, but for the family. And like I said, it wasn't until we got together and we started talking about it, then we started with a, like what they say, like a nullpunt. So we drew a line, and then okay, we're gonna start from there. Okay, so if I may change the question a little bit, nowadays, like you said, like the future is very uncertain for everybody, but more for people with autism, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
And on this side of the table, in my side, when I see a student like that in my class, in the past, I used to worry. I used to say, like, how is this student or how is this person going to fit into the job market? I didn't see it. To be honest, I didn't see it. But my answer to that was, this is not my job. My job is to give Byron, the best in what I'm good for. So if I'm going to teach you, I'm going to give you all the tools that I can give you. And somebody else, when I finish, is going to have to take over and just keep doing small steps about it. And eventually, you will find your path where you belong to society. Different students that finish school with the same situation are pretty far in the culinary, because I give a class to the culinary students and kitchen students. And that answered me, because I said, listen, you don't have to worry about your future. You have to just do your part as good, as best as you can. And from there, somebody else will do their part, and eventually you will find your space.
Exactly, because if everybody does their part, then all of the pieces of the puzzle will make a whole picture. And I think that's something very beautiful for you to say as an educator. And I hope that educators are listening and get this too. Just because, and not just with autistic people, but with any student that seems problematic, right?
Yes.
Teachers tend to give up because they feel like, this is going to be the end of the road anyway.
Yes.
And I think it's very awesome how you said it. You just got to do your part and make sure that you provide all the tools necessary and knowledge necessary for them to move forward. And they will meet other people who will provide them other tools and other knowledge. Thank you so much for that, Raymond. That was very insightful.
I want to add to that as well. Because there's teachers that give up, but there's also teachers that feel bad for the kid. And so I'm like, you don't have to feel bad for me. I'm just a normal.
Don't say that word. Don't say that word.
I'm just a regular person.
Yes.
Um,
I just happen to be autistic too, right?
Yes, and so they like put you at the side.
Yeah.
So in place of like including you, they put you like, I don't know how to explain what I want to say.
Kind of like isolate you.
Yeah, like, oh, you can't do this because you're artistic, or you have sensitive to sound, so you can't go to this
Party.
sport dag or something.
Okay.
So like that.
Okay.
I'm
Thank you
glad
for
to say
that.
Of course. My teachers at Autismo, most of them are known to me.
Nice.
For example, the unit manager currently in San Nicolas, I know her a lot, and also one member of that school, former school APB, also works at Autismo. And then there's other, of course. I'm not going to say this. Two of them who are currently teaching the Dutch class. One of them is a Dutch class, and the other is either biology or wiskunde. I'm not sure, but I'm going to check them out for sure, but not in deep. But I know them very well, of course.
That's
All right.
nice.
All right. I'm going to jump to the
Next question.
question. I'm going to say this right now.
Okay.
And this question is important.
Okay.
Do you feel like your family treated your family member well?
No. They, I have to say honestly, no, that's not the case.
Why not?
It's for the same reason of being afraid of change and being afraid of the unknown and not just wanting to give an extra step into getting to know. So it's a lot easier. The easiest step is just to put aside. Okay, so that's what happened with you. That's what happened basically. Until you grew up, until we got to know a little bit more about you. Okay, so I don't want to globalize this. I just want to keep it into a small perspective. A lot of people, including me, we have to take an extra effort to educate ourselves on this topic, on this subject.
That's
and
right.
if you don't, and anybody doesn't do this, they will just choose the easiest path, which is, like Kay said, just isolate you, push you aside, don't deal with you. It's you and your mom, not my business. So that would be the easiest one. But if anybody takes a little time, and nowadays YouTube is so great in this thing, you can just go and get like thousands of videos. And,
That's right.
Educate yourself about it, and you will understand, because like ladies just said, not all of them are alike. Okay, some of them are different, and it just benefits everybody just to get to know all these. It's a wide spectrum, but at least get to know a few of them, the ones that show up most commonly, and that will help everybody with the inclusion.
I'm sure that everybody will notice about that. And I think I agree that we shouldn't be isolated at the very moment. We have to be open to talk about inclusion at all points of view.
True.
And I think it is a very nice thing to say. All right, we have enough time for the podcast at this time. So I'm going to call in for you guys the closing statements for you guys. Starting with Carolina, what's your closing statement?
My closing statement. Oh my gosh, I don't know if I was ready. Well, like I already mentioned at the beginning, I am so happy that we have this. whomever you are, right, who is listening, if you're a parent, if you're a family member, if you're somebody who's curious, a teacher, educator, share this episode with other people. You know, what we already mentioned is just wanting to learn. It is taking this time to listen to this information, read up on other information, listen to other videos. And something that I have learned throughout the years is, ignorance is bliss to some extent, right? That's something that and it's bliss because we get to ignore everything. We get to just put aside. But let me tell you something. Ignorance is not bliss when it happens to you. Ignorance is not bliss when you have to deal with a situation. What I have learned instead is that knowledge is bliss. How and why? Because I feel awesome anytime that I encounter a situation where I know that if I didn't put in the time to learn about this, right? How random it may sound or be, anytime that I find myself in a situation where I know that I put effort to learn something and that knowledge helped me with that situation, it is a very nice feeling. And you don't have to be a teacher to feel like this. You don't have to be, in a professional setting to be like this, to feel like this. But just being at a social party, right, a social gathering, noticing that somebody is like covering their ears, starting to feel uncomfortable, just walking up to the DJ and being like, can you lower the volume, or hey, do you need a break? It's such a nice feeling to have that knowledge, to understand that that person is asking for help, maybe not even directly, but showing signs. So that's a nice feeling, and I hope that by learning, you too have that feeling, whomever you are listening. I hope that you find value in this. If it either impacts you directly, indirectly, or not at all, I am sure that one day, at some point, it will, and you will be so happy that you choose to know about it before it struck you.
Exactly.
I think that's it.
All right, and now I'm gonna pass to Raymond.
Mm-hmm.
What's your closing statement?
My closing statement. Well, it helps if everybody gets more information about this. And this is a first step, or maybe a small step, but it is a step. Okay, as an educator, even though I'm a branch of an educator, I'm a hospitality teacher. I'm a teacher. Mm-hmm. There are about 1,500 teachers on the island, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But if we all get into this and learn a little more about it, we will go a long way, a longer way. Why? Because it's not a disability, it's a different ability.
Yes.
Okay?
Of course.
So this different ability, we have to exploit it. There is so much potential, there is so many opportunities out there. Mm-hmm. And we cannot do this alone. We have to do this as a community.
Gladfully said. All right, before we go, we have a surprise for all of you out there. Didn't you guys notice that there's an event coming so soon about mental health?
Yeah.
And right next to us, we have a painting.
We can't show it yet because it's a surprise.
Of course, it's a surprise. We cannot show it to all of you yet, but stay tuned because we're going to have to show it real soon.
Maybe, Kay, can you give a very short, can you tell us about this event shortly? You can tell them that I'm the creative director. That's fine.
I don't know what to say about the painting.
You don't have to say something about the painting, but that there will be an event. Stay tuned.
On the 23rd of October.
Yes. So,
At Atelier 89.
awesome. Yes. So we will share the flyer because Fundacion Autismo Aruba also participated in this. And it's the Art for Mental Health event. Yes. So we will share it.
Of course. Art for Mental Health. It will happen on October 23rd. And that will happen so soon. So stay tuned to Fundacion Autismo Facebook and Instagram for further updates.
Yes.
Well, that's it for the first episode of Stima Autista, the podcast. I'm going to thank Kay, I'm going to thank Carolina, and I'm going to thank Raymond for coming here to Stop and Make Studio.
And I'm going to thank you, Byron.
Yeah, thank you. So I also want to thank Stop and Make Studio and its sponsors for handling this podcast. I want to thank to the producer as well. We're so glad that this is the first step of everything for Fundacion Autismo and for Stima Autista, the podcast, and for Fundacion Autismo in general. We're so glad to do this for the first time. It's my first time doing the podcast.
Yes.
Kay's first time. Raymond's first time. So glad to be here. All right, the next time that you're going to see Carolina is going to be at 6:30
Yes.
for her next episode of Sincerely Carolina. So do not miss it right here on Stop Make Studio. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye to all of you, and I'm going to leave you with a quote. You're not in the mountains. The mountains are in you. Thanks for being with us. See you next month for the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.